to your fire, baby, let me dance to your love. I wanna feel your fire burn, rising from the flames. Burn eyes on me to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again. Oh.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Get Lit. I am Rebecca Hahn, and this is my co-host, today's show stars Blue Star Dear Woman and Dakota, our herbal genius that is joining us today. As you can see, we're all together. We are in the psychedelic bus that tramples through the universe but stays right here. So I am back in Arkansas for this wonderful American holiday we call Thanksgiving. And we're coming to you today while everybody else is basting their turkeys. We're here with you across the world, telling you all the stuff that we're Get Lit about. So before we get into the topic of today, which we're completely lit up about, I just want to say to everybody that this is a real time of challenge for all of us to realize that we need to be really practicing the way of the middle path. There's really no sides in the world to choose from as long as we do our work and do our practice and learn to be in the middle path. Then all neuroses falls away, all sides fall away, and we realize we are one. And you can personalize this in any sort of aspect of your own life, but I really felt drawn to just make a statement about right now what I am feeling that we really need to practice in order to be more human is really looking at the middle path and digesting the energetics of things rather than and this is going to throw most of you off, rather than the facts of things, because the way people are motivated right now to react to things is not necessarily what's really going on. So if we choose to continue to practice the middle path, all that is to be known to us will come through us. And it's not about sides, and it's not about political agendas, and it's not about your evolution versus my evolution. It's about the best we can do in this very moment and supporting each other unconditionally, regardless of whether we agree on the facts of things. So I just felt like I needed to say that for whatever reason, because it's swirling around in a lot of different vectors of life for me, which I would think would be for other people.
All right. That was really well said. I'm very grateful for it. And ditto. And so I want to give the more comic introduction to how we ended up in this environment.
Yes. So let's talk about the bus.
Okay. So here I was being really efficient and had communicated with the library, and they very graciously said, we're closed on Thanksgiving, but we'll give you the key. Come in the day before. And so yesterday I went in, I got the key. I even checked, made sure it worked. And we got to the conference room at the library, and somehow the internet had gotten turned off. And fortunately, we had Becca in town, so we had a ride, and we had to regroup really fast. And as some of you may have known, 2 months ago, I tried to do the show from my bus, and I had all kinds of complications, and I never tried it again. Well, this was our only alternative. All the places that had Wi-Fi were closed for the holiday. So I had to get back here and throw this place together, and I'll be darned if the three of us don't fit on this couch. So this is really cozy, and I just love being in the vortex of my home, my nest. So that's where we're at. And I also want to say that right now, we're on solar electricity, okay? So our dear chatters, have they shown up yet?
I don't think so.
Tracy and Jerry, who are always here with us. Of course, they could be doing the holidays. Are they on yet?
Let me check.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Give me a second. If you're there,
Not yet.
and for anyone who has been invited to the chat room, which is at dearwoman.com, if for any reason we get challenged with enough juice, we'll probably have to
pause for a moment.
Yeah, pause for a moment and then pick up. So just hang with us. But as Biggie reassured us, there's no worries. We're just going to run this show, and it's just going to be beautiful. So hello, everyone, and I'm really glad to have you gathering with us today.
So we have been like a rabid dog on our leg with the topic around conscious dying. And this is not let go of us since probably June.
Right.
And it's sort of been the theme around what we've been talking about. And, recently I've been doing my own exploration around what it means to be partnered, what it means to be single, what it means to live a life of solitude and creativity. Can you do that in partnership? Can you do that in community? Where are those spaces of how we can cultivate a new place of silence, greater silence in ourselves? And so the topic of today is going to be titled The Great Alone. And I happened upon this article that we posted on our Facebook page that talks about differentiating between solitude and isolation, and how some of the greatest work that we do is in solitude. And I think one of the big conundrums that we're experiencing in our evolution is this leap towards greater spaciousness internally, which obviously needs greater spaciousness externally. And so how do we do that in this traditional sense of marrying and partnership, having families, but also just how do we hold that spaciousness in this human form? And so I happened upon this article, and I just want to read the opening, a little bit of the opening, because this is sort of where our topic is jumping off today. And I got really lit about this. It's like an 8-page article, but there was one phrase in there called The Great Alone. And it just caught me. And it's like, that's really what's happening in evolution, is this need for the great alone. Yet we're also coming into an era of not any longer sitting on the mountaintop for 40 years. We need that community. So how do we maintain this sense of great spaciousness when we also can't survive without community anymore? But let me just read this little piece in the opening of, okay. So the call to solitude is universal. It requires no cloister walls and no administrative bureaucracy, only the commitment to sit down and still ourselves to our particular aloneness. I want to consider solitary people and those who seek solitude as essential threads in the human weave, figures in the carpet. Hold on. I want to rethink our understanding of solitude and of solitaries, of those who live alone or who dedicate much of their time to being alone. Mm-hmm. I like defining silence as the absence of noise. Solitude and silence are positive gestures. This is why Buddhists say that we can learn what we need to know by sitting on a cushion. This is why I say that you can learn what you need to know from the silent, solitary discipline of writing or the arts. I am interested in the possibility that solitaries might lead more carefree lives. My ideal solitary carries not less, this is awesome. My ideal solitary carries not less, but more responsibility toward the self and the universe than those who couple. The solitary hasn't the luxury, which was recently called deep familial selfishness. Solitude imposes on its practitioners a choice between emotional atrophy and openness to the world, with all the reward and heartbreak that generosity implies. So this idea that people choose a solitary life to lead a more carefree, irresponsible life, or to shun the world and its engagement of the world, is actually quite opposite of what we're saying here, is that it is essential to our evolutionary growth to understand, whether you're partnered or not, how to be in solitude, in the great alone. And that within that great aloneness is where we find our own growth, where we find the sounds of silence, right? Where we have a greater responsibility to open up to the world. And you could say, open up to the God within. And I'll reference this more as we go on, but it just really caught me, because recently I was alone for a week. And my creative juices just flourished. My ritual came back to me. Every cell in my being sort of felt like it was breathing again. And I really had to look at that. And so, we could talk about boundaries, setting healthy boundaries in relationships. And I'll refer back to this next statement, which is one of my most endearing, strong, soulful relationships was for most of my decade of my 20s. And I used to say to my partner all the time, I love it because we can be alone together. And he would go downstairs and sculpt, and I would go into the extra bedroom and sew or design houses or meditate, which I didn't know if that's what I was doing at the time at 22 years old. But and it's been really hard to find that again in this lifetime. So how do we create that internal spaciousness and have it honored and set a boundary around that? But also, if we choose to live a solitary life unpartnered, how do we use that solitude not to judge ourselves for being spinsters or bachelors, but how do we use that to really fully engage in expanding towards the universe
Right on.
in
Right
that
on.
solitude? So that's kind of where we're going today. I'm really lit up about the
Yeah.
great alone. I mean, that statement alone just lights me up with so much possibility. The great alone.
Yeah. And what was it when we did Aldous
Aldous
Huxley?
Huxley's.
Oh,
Mhm.
and he was citing from the Buddhist teachings, and he called it the great sorrow.
Mhm.
And I've shared with you before, I've been in a solitary space now for
Well, and we're going to talk about that, how you and I have talked a lot about the days of silence we've had in absolute stillness.
exactly. And but he spoke of the great sorrow, and it was something I really needed some clarity and insight about, because always in the deepest within me, I always could come to this feeling of such sadness. I could be laughing my ass off, crying, laughing. And as soon as I stopped, boom, I sunk into this sorrow. And I really understood that. It really turned it for me. So here we have this article, and I don't know if you said the title. It was Going It Alone. All right. And are they
The
on board?
title of the, yes. And
All right.
we've got Karen here too. Hi, Karen.
We got Karen Lambie.
Yeah, and Tracy.
Oh,
I
my
haven't
gosh.
seen Jerry yet.
Oh, that's so
I'm so
cool.
happy. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Hello,
American
beautiful ones.
style.
Yeah. Hi, beautiful ones. I'm so glad to have you on board. And I want to encourage you, if at any point you want to just jump in this conversation with us, the number is on the screen. Just call in and join the discussion. We are always open, especially you three. I mean, we know you so well, and you're brilliant. But I think you're going to like this conversation. So we'll spiral it a little longer. And when you get the impulse, come on board.
So the title's called Going It Alone by Fenton Johnson. It's out of Harper's, which is actually kind of a fabulous.
Well, the link is on
And the link is on the Facebook page.
on the Facebook page.
And this is going to become, I'm feeling like this is going to become a series. So
Yeah.
you guys get ready to be guests on the show.
Yeah.
We have agendas for all of
Yeah,
you.
and especially because Karen and Tracy, who are online right now, are both in relationships. And we also know that you're also brilliant in your self-growth and consciousness.
So do your hair, get it together, because
Yeah.
you're going to get on the show with
Go,
us.
you're going to get on the show with
So,
us.
you know,
All right. So I was speaking to, I've been in a very solitary space for several years.
Mhm.
And I have to say, when I read this article, and Becky and I did get a chance to have a conversation about this yesterday. When I read this article, it was like, I think it's the first time I saw anything that affirmed my solitary self as nothing fucking unusual.
Yeah.
And I have struggled with that same thing, because I knew that, I had to go into deep places about, oh my gosh, is my solitary, am I too selfish? Am I not connecting with the world? Am I falling out of the picture? And of course, I've spoken to dying, just about on a regular basis. But I felt very empowered by it. And I do want to say something interesting to make a jump to coupling. All my life, I've been in relationships. I think up until this phase of solitariness, I think there was maybe 6 months of my life I wasn't in a relationship. And I remember my relationships were short, like they go 3 or 6 months, and then I'd be on to the next one. And then I did a whole bunch of therapy and self-reflection back in the, late 70s. And my question was, it was like, I really wanted to understand why am I not being able to develop what I called intimacy? And so I really dove deep into that, and then made just such an effort in my relationships to really, experience my emotions, stay present with my feelings, don't hide and da-da-da. And of course, I came from a physically and sexually abused past. So I had lots of reasons to stay hidden and not say who I really was. Okay, so years went on, and I finally had probably my most prominent relationship with a wonderful woman. And inevitably, I mean, we lasted quite a long time, and we're still very close to each other, love each other dearly. But inevitably, I left this relationship. I had to leave this relationship. And one of the things that she said to me that was so profound, and at the time I was Jessie Dear Woman, and she says, Jessie Dear Woman, I've got two things to say to you. When and if you enter another relationship, I want you to remember you're already in a relationship with yourself. Number two, keep your own living space. And to this day, and even now, after reading this article, it is so powerful, because it took me all this time to realize, yeah, my relationship is to me. And it appears selfish, and I've said that before. I like to use the word self-full when we're on this path. And
How dare you?
How
How dare
me.
you be full of yourself?
And that was so it. It was like myself, I wanted to be with me more than anything, and I still do. And I could not make that person outside me take the priority. And I struggled with that for years. So I did want to share that.
Yeah, so I think the thread of kind of how we're weaving this, where I see it going to, just to prep y'all in your minds, is speaking of this idea of letting go of our paradigm beliefs around what we call spinsters, bachelors, solitaries, carefree versus martyrdom, you know, because there's really nothing in between Jesus and, you know.
Yeah, right. That's right.
George Clooney at this point, you know. So, and the other aspect I really think is important. So looking at that, and then looking at partnership in terms of living a solitary, spacious life. The third point would be evolution, and how it's imperative to evolution to embrace our solitary nature and create the spaciousness, because I believe evolutionarily we are getting closer to God.
Yeah.
We are opening up the fifth dimension. We are opening up our pineals to a place that it hasn't been before, and we need space to hold this new dimension. The last place I'd like to look at is in terms of our sexuality and sensuality, which we briefly touched on in our conversations, which could be a whole other part of the series, but I think to kind of touch on these aspects today. And of course we have Dakota here, who I always peg as, you know, and you can tell me to shut up if this is offensive, but I just love it for you, which is the Snow White that never went with the prince. You know, this is the life of Snow White. Had she been like, a castle, fuck that, man, I'm going to go commune with the animals and the herbs and make it happen and go into that other parallel universe that's so powerful. But, you know, the story time we have with Dakota is so enriching for me. And she did the great alone more than anybody I have ever seen do it. The bravery and the spaciousness that she created. And so we'll have story time today, and hopefully over the next several weeks, about someone who actually practiced this great alone.
That's right. And just to make reference to that, Dakota will share with you as we interview, we're always asking her questions, but she spent 10 years in the wilderness. And that's what we're
unassisted.
Yeah, and that's what we're referring to.
Yeah.
And now I'll talk about exploring our solitary selves. All right. Now I've done it thinking, you know, under the auspices of spiritual path. You know, I wanted to go inside myself. But I'll tell you what, this article brought me so back into the world. And I was standing.
Yes,
it did. And I went, holy shit, I really am a part of this whole scene. It's just that nobody's ever written about me.
It's imperative that you step out so that you can step into it in a greater, deeper, more spacious understanding.
And last night I was standing in this very bus. This is my home. I was standing in this very bus in the quiet that I love, because I'm surrounded by the earth. And I went, holy shit, I live here with God.
Yeah,
I really did. And I said, and I'm so tired of not being able to use God. It's like, it works. My understanding of God is me. And I really did. I had this
if you're one
profound
with
moment.
God, you can be one with George Clooney and Jesus all together.
That's right.
You know, it's cool, man.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so the next bridge, as you know, you just kind of insinuate, I don't know how much we're going to get into it, but the next bridge is the value and the understanding of this while you're in a relationship. Okay. And that it is potentially there. But now we're talking about a lot of spiritual and emotional maturity with each other in that relationship. Is can you experience your own God self? Really, your number one.
And that's where he talks about responsibility.
There you go.
It's not frivolous.
No.
It's a great deep level of responsibility. But later he talks about the great suffering. He actually talks about the great suffering in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we've gone beyond that. I think it's a greater, more disorienting responsibility to experience the great joy of the great alone, and that we don't have to suffer in it, that we can actually move beyond that. I think evolution has put us in a place to really expand towards shimmering in joy in the great expanse of it.
Mm-hmm.
But to go, what were you going to say? And then I'll.
Well, I was just being sensitive to Dakota.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, if at any point you want to jump in.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just sitting over here alone right now.
in her great alone.
She's in her great alone.
She's practicing the great alone while we are completely like, don't leave me!
Yeah.
Don't leave me! I'm trying to hear blue!
We're talking about the great alone. We couldn't be any more
I know.
physically connected.
That is so hilarious.
Here on the
We're
couch.
talking
Right?
about the great alone, yet we all happen to be in the same room together on this one day.
Yeah, right. That's great.
Don't fucking leave me! Leave me alone! So,
I would like to say one thing, though.
Yes.
That out of my experience of all of those years in the wilderness, one of the key points that I learned is that it's impossible to be alone.
yeah.
Absolutely impossible to be alone.
So how did you
And-
discover that? What was that experience like? Describe that.
Well, I in one of our talks before, I spoke about how early on I was able to get connected to nature's broadband, where there's this, which is not a metaphor, but quite a literal frequency of information that's connecting everything in nature, and information is being shared constantly through all of the living cellular tissue.
It's the quantum field, but I love
Yeah.
nature's broadband.
Yeah.
Well, it is, because they're carrier waves, a type of a weak laser beam that's carrying information from the DNA of plant cells and animal cells through space, and it's going back and forth, and it keeps getting carried along, and there's information being transferred back and forth. So when you become sensitive to that and realize there's all this information coming into you and moving out, you are not alone. I mean, it's like all of these life forms around us are engaged with us, and we're engaged with them whether we know it or not. So so early on, as I said, I felt an affinity to all of these different life forms, that there was a connection there. And so I never, and my understanding from that was just that you can't be alone. It's a relative term. We have concepts about it that, if we aren't engaged in the constructs of society and definitions that society has about our relationships with each other, that idea of aloneness comes out of that. It doesn't come out of
And that's
reality.
what he's speaking of.
Right.
That construct we have around it.
Mhm.
And that reminds me of when I just sat here and went, don't fucking leave me, don't leave me
Yeah.
alone. And then we got
Right.
this extreme over here of like the great alone, really practicing the great alone. If we look at aloneness developmentally, it becomes so clear. It's like when we start where a kid says, leave me alone. I slam our door. Get out of my face. Like we have to be almost like
Yeah.
what's the word I'm looking for? Volatile about declaring our aloneness, and it's so uncomfortable that the crisis is the only way to get us to actually be spacious. And then we go to like, I'm feeling like I just need some time by myself. It's okay, or we don't get into relationship because of it. Or then when we're in partnership, we talk about that thing that I just talked about, which is boundaries. And then we get to a place where it's not even about boundaries anymore, or stating my boundary, or I just need some space to myself. I still love you. And then we go and we do our alone time, and we have this weird guilt going, I wonder what they're doing. I wonder how they're feeling about me taking my boundary. I wonder, or someone rejects your boundary and gives you the guilt. But now we're in a place developmentally and evolutionarily where I think the great alone is imperative, and we don't have to own it as this old paradigm, this old construct, that it's not even about boundaries anymore, because my spaciousness connects to your spaciousness.
Right. Okay. So my question is, where and how are we discerning? Like, I know that when I'm in the company of someone else, all right, is it, from your perspective, Dakota, is it amped up that my connectedness is so intense because now I'm sitting with the two of you, okay? Or in a relationship, what is it like, are we experiencing that makes us go, wait a minute, I can't find my God, I can't find myself. Is it a lack of stillness and quietude that we're not sharing? Or is it amped up? How would you define that? Like, I guess the animals in the earth are so organic. It's like, some people get freaked out with too much cicadas singing, right? So what is it that clicks in our head that goes, I need space from you? Is it a call within?
I don't think there's one answer to that.
Yeah.
Because so much can be going on with a person, but I do think that part of our problem is that we don't know how to be, quote, alone together. We feel we have these roles that we put on, that we get stuck in relationships, and often there's this odd kind of power play that develops in relationships around those roles. And once those roles get set up, it's very difficult to step outside of that role, because you need to do that in order to be able to enter into the solitude. There aren't any roles around solitude. And so it's,
well, it appears, I know that when I've dropped into my solitude within relationship, the typical response would be like, why aren't you paying attention to me? Why aren't you talking to me? Why can't we eat together? Why didn't you think about me when you decided to go for a walk? It's this constant external connecting.
right.
And I know that I got in a very solitary place when I was in the relationship I just spoke of. And I was building a house at the time, and I think that's where I was putting my energies. But I got so solitary, the relationship fell out. But in my deepest heart, I never saw the end result being separate. I was just always hoping I could be embraced in this solitary place.
Well, it takes two to tango, right? So,
Yes.
Where is your partner with all of that? Do they, to understand what the solitary realm is all about, you have to be able to move into it. And if your partner isn't able to do that, then they're going to interpret everything from that external, and it'll be read incorrectly,
Look at you go, Freud. I love it. Who knew?
We're doing Granny Woman therapy today.
Yeah.
You can call in and ask your deepest sorrow.
So that you can engage in the great alone.
We are speaking from the wilderness.
You're the
That
sacred
is what-
clown.
that's
Clown.
yourself.
You've got Freud, and I'm the mediator. I'm the timekeeper.
This is good though.
But it's, that really brings up that point. I'm really glad you did, about the roles that we share, because all I want to say about that is we're so conditioned in our human suits and our human psyches that we're constantly, even on the most subtle level, still playing those roles. Even when we've
Right.
done our practice and we've become adept at expanding those boundaries to a place of honoring the solitude in relationships, we still are constantly having to metacognate and meta-emote and track. Is that role giving or taking right now? Is it serving a purpose? Do I need to be in it? Can I step out of it? Does it no longer exist in this relationship? And is that okay? But that takes work, and that takes a lot of maturity, emotionally and spiritually.
The word that just came to me was polygamy, a relationship of 3, right?
God, me, and you.
God, me, and you. It's like the divine trine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's almost like, I love you, babe, but I got to spend time with God. And you've got to work out the jealousy issues, right? You got to work out, I'm going to take a
better
walk
yet,
with God
come
right
with
now.
me.
It doesn't mean that I don't love you, but I'm going to walk with God right now. And then it's like, well, can we walk together?
Get in line. First I got God, then I got Jesus, then I got George Clooney, and then you're fourth in line. So you know what, dude? Take a break.
Right. I'm sorry, baby. I haven't seen you in a week, but
I gotta
why
slide.
don't you go take a walk with God?
My dance card is full. My spiritual dance card is full.
And if you take a walk with God, you see there's always a partner.
Right.
Nobody's ever lacking. You always got somebody. Had to go there.
The great alone. Yeah. I mean, we're being silly about it, but really, this is when we call the show Get Lit and we just go, I get something and I go, whoo,
Yeah.
it's a conceptually something is breaking open,
Yes.
and we're not sure where it's leading us. But when I read that article, I was like, that is it. This is the crux of what I've been experiencing, of what evolution is really, yes, conscious death, all of that. But this is the crux, I think, of what's happening.
Well, it's like, we'll have a crux now. That's why we can have a show
Called
of Get Lit, because next week we'll have another crux.
It might still be, I think it's going to be the same crux.
No,
for a while.
and the conscious dying is still rolling around.
Yeah.
But that's the idea, though. I love that you brought back, Get Lit. You get excited because you have a new insight.
Yeah.
Something's making sense. Pieces fall together for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
Because in the next moment, it doesn't matter where the pieces fall. Right? In the next moment, you go back behind the perspective, behind the insight, and that's not there anymore. And that's where we hang out. That's the great alone, because you're no longer defining yourself or your moment.
Yeah.
That one's puzzling. I can see it all over your face.
Well, I was just echoing that word great alone in my head. And for whatever reason, even just naming it, and I know we're not supposed to name things because then they exist. And if you name something, it exists and it can be destroyed, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
But for me, naming it, discovering the name of what that is, it's just, I ever since I caught those 2 words out of the 35,000 that were written, however many,
Right.
I was like, just repeating that word for me brings such peace and spaciousness and okayness.
But you
in
see,
everything.
that's that knowledge is powerful. But see, again, okay, we're gonna bridge this with conscious dying. Okay, we have things come forward.
It's
right?
a cigarette,
Just
by the way.
Yeah,
I call them cowboy cigarettes.
Okay, so we have things come forward. It's almost like even when we don't feel well, we feel better once we can diagnose ourselves for
Right.
whatever reason. It's like, oh, okay, that's it. Now I know how to treat myself or what have you. But it's the same thing in the world. It's the same thing that we're doing as all the investigative reporters. We're getting the information, okay? So now it's like, oh, wow, that's what's been going on the planet, okay? But we don't hold on to it because, as we've noticed, that was what happened on the planet yesterday. Now we got another piece of intel, and it's like, oh, shoot, yesterday just shifted. Or yesterday is like, well, maybe that's not true, all right? But when we get to that place of too much information and we're holding on to it, we're going, well, wait a minute, I'm a solitary and I'm okay. And it's like, and God's with me. And it's like, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, there's something else. All our perspectives and all that intel has got to fall away. You've got to allow it to die, because evolution is that. our evolving selves. I mean, the excitement and getting lit in life right now is knowing that the mystery is unfolding continuously, so we can get lit infinitely. All right. And I love that part of life. But everything has to fall away. And that's the place I had kind of shared with Melvie and Biggie on, I think it was just yesterday. And I don't know if I was being very clear when I was saying that, eventually, and I'm not trying to, you know, talk us out of a job or a place to express or a platform. But eventually, the question I ask is, when do we stop reporting? When do we stop? Maybe we don't, but it seems like reporting has a death to it as well. However, there's more and more intel that keeps coming in. All right. So we're still after more knowledge. But there's a certain amount of reporting that's a loop. It's kind of like, the part about history repeats itself.
Right.
How much more do we have to report on war when war is predictable? Like, when do we have enough information about war that we don't have to talk about it any longer? And so I think death is behind everything. So I just go to the extreme. I go, well, when do we no longer need to report? Okay. And that's just the way I explore. I'm not saying that's a truth or a fact or anything, but that's just the way I explore. And that's what gets me more into the nothingness,
Yeah.
more into infinite multidimensional allowance is when I let the whole dimensional reality fall out. Now who am I?
Yeah. So let's touch base with our
Chatters.
our chatter. So we're going to step back a moment to the relationship part. Tracy says, I think it's so time to celebrate the exploration of our individual selves, especially when coupled. Two halves don't make it whole. Two whole people make it magic.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
I love that. And
That's
Jerry
nice,
said,
Tracy.
Jerry said, beautifully said. I love you.
Love you, Tracy.
Love you, Tracy. Jerry says he loves you.
Uh,
And then Jerry says, I think that alone time, even one is when partnered, allows us to communicate more fully with various facets of our own self. Yeah, because we're knowing our own selves better.
right.
And then Tracy says, I think sometimes that insecurities of either partner can clash when it comes to alone time. And that goes back to the idea of, if we're not both doing the work and both understanding what this is, then it becomes about, don't fucking leave me.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then, the partner who is expanding and taking a long time is going, oh, the guilt, the this, the that. And so,
Hey, I just want to take a moment and keep your train of thought. Karen, Tracy, and Jerry, who are in our chat room, introduce yourselves to each other. You're all brilliant. Okay.
well, hopefully Jerry and Tracy know each other.
I know, but I was saying include Karen.
Karen
Karen's
into that.
another brilliant being.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the great alone, yeah, it's a complex, wonderful opening. And this idea, there's so many layers to it. There's the layers of, we spoke briefly yesterday. This is a six-part series. The sixth part would be, how do we teach our children to be in the great alone? Because everything is bombarding them constantly.
Right.
That in order for us to survive in humanity, I think it's imperative that we start teaching our children about that great alone, to be one with everything.
Could I say something about that?
Yeah.
When I had my Montessori school, I had 100 children ages 3 to, this is before it went to elementaries. It was 3 to, I think it was 5, maybe some 6-year-olds. 100 in kind of like one big space. And in Montessori, the atmosphere for the children to grow is one that's fairly quiet. It's not children running around screaming and yelling and stuff. And sometimes the children would get a little bit rowdy. And I discovered through experimentations, one of the best ways to help them calm down is that I would go sit in the middle of the room and just sit on the carpet and start meditating. And they would become curious and quiet and come around, and it just brought everything down with the children and helped them shift gears.
Right.
And so I think that's one thing that can be helpful in terms of teaching children about this is um, to be at a time when we feel called to jump into the fray and push our weight around or whatever or get louder than they are, um, to go into that deep presence with
Mhm.
them as um, a way of clearly demonstrating what quiet is or what
Mhm.
presence is or what any of that is and just doing it with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I do my professional development with teachers, one of the main things we talk about is self-regulation. I mean, that's part of
Mhm.
the professional development is how
Right.
do you get children to learn how to self-regulate?
Mhm.
And I always say to them, you're the piece that will teach them how to self-regulate.
Mhm.
You
Right.
have to learn to say, and I don't use words like meditate or expansiveness or grounding. I use words that won't scare them, but it's really about, they will model your
Mhm.
energetic level.
Yeah.
Well, that's what
And you need to learn to take care of
Mhm.
yourself, and you
Mhm.
need to find your great alone, and you need to
Mhm.
find your expansiveness, because otherwise, how do you expect them to?
that's exactly all right. I was pretty engaged in special education, and I worked with the very severely special need, especially the autistic. And it was my quietude. This was like the peak of my meditation days that I was working with these children. And it was my silence. Even I lessened my movement,
Mhm.
or I would just kind of float quietly amongst them.
Mhm.
And not only did it affect their energetic level, but telepathically,
Mhm.
I was so much more attuned and sensitive to what they needed to communicate.
Mhm.
And I had incredible success,
Yeah.
and had these incredible telepathic exchanges
Mhm.
where they guided me,
Mhm.
and I knew what the next thing was to do. But I found that too, just
Mhm.
quieting down. I mean, yes, you address all the other things, make sure they're
Mhm.
comfortable, they're not hungry, and they're not hurt.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I agree.
The other aspect of how I handle it is to become a strong, steady center, because teachers want to fix things, and they
Mhm.
tend to go where the students go, and then they want to fix it from up here. And I have this
Yeah.
thing that I do with teachers I call the Lord of the Flies, where if the kids are like, I'll walk in a room, the teacher will be like, oh my God, Rebecca, I cannot get them to do anything today, blah, blah, blah. And, and you want to get them in a circle and have them work together. And I was like, let me just put the music on. It indicates to them that they need to shift their energy and don't do a thing. Like I've got them in like a fucking stronghold, a chokehold, pulling them back from wanting to deal with the kids. And I say, just do it. Let them do their Lord of the Flies. Let them take their chaos to such a level that the only place to go is down,
Oh, yeah.
where they
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
problem solve this. They have to shift their energy in a way, but
Uh-huh.
you cannot do it for them.
Mhm.
You have to stay strong and
Mhm.
clear in your great alone and your
Right.
great expansiveness. And this is not the words I use with them. They will find their way through
Yeah.
it as long as they're safe and as long as they're,
Right.
So that other aspect is that they'll take their chaos to a place where the only place to go is more towards
Mm.
calm, like
Mhm.
the rubber
Mhm.
band theory. So I call it the Lord of the Flies. They're just
That's good.
they're going to eat themselves alive
Yeah.
Yeah.
until they figure it out.
Okay. Now, the other very challenging thing, and what I only saw something just yesterday, is the devices right now.
Mm.
Technology
Well,
and the
that's part of what we're talking
devices.
about,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. And I'm really glad that we're seeing on the social network. Now we're starting to see videos of how adults are distracted by the phones, the devices, and the lack of moderation is
Mhm.
really divorcing us. And the thing is that that's that external antidote to the great alone. Oh, I can chat now with my friends. I can watch this
Mhm.
video. And I put a video on my page. I forget who it was, but it's all about that. He does like a whole rap. It's brilliant. It's on my
Mhm.
Facebook. And he is pointing out we are getting less and less human
Mhm.
with each other. We're not looking at one another in the eyes. And
Mhm.
it's like we're even misunderstanding it with something like, hey, how about you and I get together? And the one person's thinking, oh, like this, we'll get together, right? And the response is, okay, I'll Skype you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I have something to say about that.
Okay,
This is
so-
really fascinating. And
okay.
then I want to bring this into the bigger loop because
Okay.
this is not just about children.
Right.
So research has shown, and I did a bunch of research on neuroscience around connection and trust and all these things. And I actually found an article on online dating and why people fall in love so quickly and then fall out of love so quickly. I've talked to you about this
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
So here's the fascinating piece. When we Skype or talk on the phone, which, you know, for online dating is, you know, the first 6 months is all about Skyping and talking on the phone and emailing and messaging. The way we process information is in a completely different part of the brain than we do when the retinal, the visual cortex is stimulated, which is the window to the soul. The eyes, you know, are the window to the soul. So I
Right.
can fall in love with you through Skype and it doesn't even hit the part of the brain which
Ah,
activates trust, compassion, empathy, true, deep, soulful love,
wow. That's
and
good.
visualizations of future.
Mm.
You can't visualize any of that. It doesn't light up that part of the brain
Oh, that's great.
or the heart or the gut, because now we know we have two other brains.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why then when people meet, they get super scared, or people just fall out online like, well, he said he loved me and then I never heard from him again, or I never heard from her again. And it's because people aren't really fully engaged in that soul to soul connection that they have in person. So when we take this into the bigger context
Yeah.
of being constantly stimulated by non-retinal, full-bodied experiences,
Wow.
you know, and we're so bombarded and we're so crowded that the great alone is even more challenging, yet we need it so much more. And it's not just with children. And here's what's going on for me, which I think why this is so fascinating, is I've been alone a while, and Blue and I both experienced the great alone in such deep ways. Like, you know, she says to me, you get flatter than anybody I've ever seen, ever. Flatter and more still. And I'm not talking just sitting like flat on the floor,
Yeah.
you know, one with the wood or the earth, to the point where she can't even stir me yet. So much is moving
Yeah.
around in the subtleness of it. But, you know, days, not just like an hour of the great alone and
Mhm.
stillness and expansiveness, but like weeks and days of it. And I'm partnered again. And we're having challenges. And one of those challenges is finding authentic connection.
Mhm.
And several months ago, I said to my partner, if we have to sit and I did not know exactly what it actually meant by me saying this, but I said, if we have to sit in silence for the next 6 months till something authentic moves us to connect, that's what I'm going to do, because our contract is done. This busy trying to connect with expectations and roles and shoving ourselves into these places where we need to behave as man and woman and blah. I'm done. If it means we don't have sex, if it means we don't even talk for 6 months, I am not moving on this new contract until it emerges on its own.
Right on.
And then we fought it, of course, which meant we fought. And we fought it again, which meant we fought some more. And then lo and behold, I wake up one day and it's been like a month since we've actually even spoken. And I'm like, oh, it's happening anyway. And I can't apologize for it anymore. And I
Yeah.
can't overcompensate for it. I can't take care of anybody in it. And so what I'm seeing happening, and this brings it back to technology and how bombarded we are, is he's going deeper into technology. Like,
Mm.
we'll go somewhere, and in any moment where there's a gap, and I love this man. This is not discrediting him. It's just our own process of discovering this stuff. If there's any sort of gap in what's given to us, whether it's, you know, paying for the groceries or running the errands, if there's even a moment of gap where we're like in transition from one
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
to the next,
Right.
he's on his phone reading something.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to somebody, if we run into somebody at the grocery store, he will get on his phone. So I think there's something in that
Okay.
about being so fearful of the great alone. And we can
Yes.
relate this to our children and how they're being raised too, and what's
Mhm.
happening energetically in them. But this is what people are doing. I think the expansiveness in us is growing evolutionarily. At the same time, it's disorienting us to the point when we don't know what to do with. So we're going to technology.
Right.
to
It's
fill that
almost like
gap.
we're not mature enough to really have the technology.
Yeah. So I'm
Like,
taking
there
my
has to
great
be-
alone.
There has to be some kind of protocol of virtues of the phone or
Virtues of artificial intelligence.
virtues of artificial intelligence. There you go. Because yeah, we're out of balance.
Mhm.
And
Am I dry?
you know, and if we think about the powers that
If
were,
you make me.
I
um,
won't make
then that was a deliberate technological maneuver to, oh, holy shit, they're starting to look at themselves. They're starting to meditate more. Da 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 da. We better find another new shiny toy.
Yeah.
And that's all we have here is the next shiny toy, the next gadget to keep us distracted. And right, And if we don't explore that great alone, we don't know who the fuck we are.
Well, can I say something about that?
Yeah,
Can
please.
she say something? Should we let her?
So,
Should we
Great.
let her?
Granny Woman wants to say something.
Teilhard de Chardin
Mm.
spoke about the noosphere that was developing.
The what?
The newest.
The
sphere.
noosphere.
Okay.
And the noosphere, he saw it on its way before the internet. And he described these different layers of being on this earth, and the noosphere being a connected information, knowledge, mental highway that would completely envelop everyone and everything on the earth as this, I suppose you could call it like a hive mind in a way, but he looked ahead into the future and saw that the evolutionary trend was for, and of course the noosphere represents the knowledge sphere, right?
Mhm.
But
So,
more sacred knowledge is what he's more talking about. The infinite knowledge.
well, yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know if he used that term. I mean, he was in that, in all
finding
about
it.
the sacred, but as a natural process of evolution of where we're going. And there have been some interesting conversations lately about how we're just at the baby steps of the development of this noosphere, which is, it's like a awkward, and there's obviously an attraction to this realm where there's so much sharing going on. Everyone wants to share everything. And so I think it's too early to say where all of that's going, but it could be that within that, as I was saying, what I discovered in the wilderness is that it's impossible to be alone. And it makes for an interesting notion of what solitude really is. And I think that we have a mistaken notion about what solitude is. We define it in terms of, again, these concepts that it means just being alone, and it's like my space and
pulling away
and
from
pulling
everything that
away,
is.
and it's like I'm over here,
Isolated.
isolated, and what it seems to me that solitude really is at its core is about presence. And when you are in presence, first two things happen. First of all, everybody's attracted to you, because when you're present with somebody, it means that they have your full attention.
Mhm.
And if you look at what do people really, really want, they want attention.
Mhm.
We're all hungering for attention. And of course, people are flocking to the internet because, they have a sense of agency there where they can experience someone somewhere is going to pay attention to them. So I think that there's something developing where in the noosphere, there's that realm of knowledge, wisdom, information sharing, where we are able to step into at some point in its development that will allow us to have a sense of presence and solitude within even that. And I kind of picture it as being like, it's like the river just is flowing through, the river of information, of knowledge. Yeah, it's just flowing through, and you're just present there. And it's like you're not, I can't say it's not affecting you, because you're part of it, you're participating in it, but you're participating not out of a need, not out of neediness, but simply, the witness, the observer, and
The vessel.
and we are that all the time anyway. We just aren't completely aware of it. I mean, just imagine all of the radio waves and TV waves and everything that are flowing straight through us right now. I mean, it's all there.
Everywhere.
We're just not aware of it.
Right.
And so, you know, this need to constantly be plugging in and all of that. I think there may be somewhere along the line a
Oh,
real
nice.
calling to go there to start kind of feeding the development of this noosphere. And at some point, um, if it truly is what Chardin foresaw as a noosphere, it will click and change.
Nice. Oh, I love your perspective on this. That's beautiful because it brings it all back into balance. It's as though it's almost seducing our presence.
Mm-hmm.
That at some
Mhm.
point there's because
Practicing.
there is a consciousness happening in the social network of
Mhm.
being watchful and moderate
Mm-hmm.
and discern what you're filling yourself with. So that consciousness is permeating
Mhm.
through the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, of course, we would evolve through it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mhm.
That's really beautiful because, yeah, I think I was even gullible to seeing it divided, and I don't want to see it divided,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
but I always come back to moderation.
Right.
But I love that.
Well,
Yeah, I
it
see
will
where you're
be
going.
it will be divided because there's always polarity.
Okay.
You know, until it's like that pendulum that always swings from one extreme
Mhm.
to
Right.
the next extreme until finally it kind of settles down into that what you were saying is the middle path.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
you know, we aren't quite there yet, and I know I see it swing all the time from one extreme of this is how we're really all connected to the other of like, oh, you know, we can't even look each other in the eye anymore, have a
Right.
conversation. And then there's, you know, there's a big thing about not having internet in certain restaurants or zones is like a safety realm to go to
Mm.
get away from it. So anyway,
So it's almost like because it is a dualistic nature on the planet right now, at least in this dimensional plane, that it's almost like we want to go to that extreme because that's what completes the cycle.
It's
That's what
training
brings
wheels.
it's
We're
the
not quite
critical
ready for
mass.
the real
Mhm.
great alone. So we're
Mhm.
Right. But I think also like in duality, we're still struggling with, I guess we've hit critical mass with war tactics and that's starting to fizzle. I
Mhm.
think we've already hit it and it's fizzling out.
Mhm.
So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
so they're having a freaking love fest these
Who?
down here.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
good.
going back to what I said about like not even breathing until we find an authentic impulse to breathe. Tracy said it reminds me of that exercise where you don't breathe until you feel authentically compelled to do so, or in dance with authentic movement. Don't move until you have an impulse.
Right.
Don't connect until you do. And we have to become so expansive in our great aloneness that we're cognizant
Mm.
of those moments of authenticity where the impulse to breathe or breathe together
Mhm.
or tap into the information highway to get what we need from it.
Well,
And
that's also how we have control over our thoughts.
exactly.
Is that you spend so much deep inner reflection is you can identify the first impulse that's going to
Yeah.
create that thought.
And
And
the
that's
only
where
way to do
you
that
can,
is to sit in solitude
yeah.
and train yourself in those
Mhm.
ways. And Tracy says, Jerry says tech is a convenient hiding place, and Tracy says it's a comfortable distraction from the exploration of self. But I also think maybe, Tracy, what you're also saying that you might not have known you were saying is that it is a comfortable distraction. At this point, so many people aren't ready for the great alone
Right.
Mhm.
that we're learning to be alone in the presence of others with this little training wheel, with this distraction
Yeah,
in
yeah,
place.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
a
speaks to
good
what
point.
Dakota just shared.
That's why I kind of flipped it.
Yeah,
and
that's
go,
good.
yeah, do you really know what you were saying there, Tracy? That was kind of brilliant. Solitude is about presence. So well said.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to get George Clooney and Jesus in the same room with you, just be present.
Be present.
Be your present
And,
self.
and they be here now.
And they be here now, right there with you. Yeah, so it's this the great alone. And when we talk about that in terms of, this authentic impulse, how often do we actually feel this authentic
Mm.
impulse. How often do we do something when we check in with ourselves and just sit in our great alone and go, now is the time to engage in this?
Mhm.
And I think about this in terms of, partnership, since we're sort of in that realm of how do we embrace our great alone in partnership? How do we become mindful of our own limitations that we set on ourselves, whether it's celibacy or monogamy or intimacy? So one of the things this article says, he talks about the idea of, again, solitude being expansive, and things like celibacy being an expansive opening where it's a really conscious practice. It's not about shutting yourself down, but because he says, I'm celibate right now. As I'm typing these words, I am celibate.
Mhm.
I'm not being intimate. And people are celibate while they're having sex
Yeah,
because
that's
they're
right.
not being intimate. And
That's
so
right.
when I look at the practice within my relationship or the couples that have experienced having dry spells, a lot of times it comes out of not honoring the great alone, but it's foddered with guilt and not being able to connect and wanting things a certain way sexually or sensually, or just being so afraid of what it really means to ascend through a sexual vehicle, through a sensual vehicle, coming together in your both great aloneness. And as Tracy said, finding that magic. Two
Mhm.
alones make the magic. That when you're really in the practice of being sensual and sexual for your own self-growth, you're really speaking of the great alone together. Two people fully, absolutely expanded in their own presence, coming together. So you can be fucking your partner
Mhm.
and be celibate, because we're really not talking about being together. Or you can be celibate and be incredibly sexual and sensual in growing and expanding within your art.
Right. And he makes mention, I so identified with it. He says, here you have this sexual interaction with someone, and inevitably you feel the deep sadness
Yeah.
afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was, to me, I so identify with that, because I always felt that in the height of just, in that loving space, in that sexual space, and then afterwards, it's like everything, you come back to yourself, you come back to your aloneness. And I think that's the sadness, is that there can almost be the illusion when you're interacting that you're connecting,
Mm-hmm.
you're experiencing, and then really what you're experiencing is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And he even spoke to guilt
Mhm.
after being sexual, because you come back to you like you're not connected with the other person. You come back to your total awareness of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, there's a polarity right there that we have to resolve. And how many times after being sexual, like there's that intimacy that lingers, and then all of a sudden it's over. You can't dwell on it any longer. You can't hold it any longer. You've had breakfast now for 3 hours after having sex. And it's like one of you wants to go out and garden and the other one wants to get on the computer. It's like, when do I get back to me? You know?
Can I read something? A little bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people who claim to be celibate, many within marriage, that these writers' unwillingness to accept the practice strikes me as evidence of failure of knowledge. How ignorant they must be of the intellectual history to be so unaware of the long list of celibate geniuses, a failure of imagination, or a failure of vision. How thoroughly they must have bought into the myth that life organizes itself around the literal fact of who puts what where. And we can look at that anatomy, or we can look at that as, organizing the bigger pieces of life, rather than around the richer or more complex manifestations of desire. So it's not about who puts what where, or my life is organized, but around the richer and more complex manifestations of desire. What is truly being desired here? Counter to the avalanche of messages from our culture, I recognize celibacy not as negation, but as a joyous turning inward.
And that's like what you're saying. You can be sexual and be celibate.
Right. Let us acknowledge that solitude and celibacy are related, but not necessary conditions for each other. I have known garrulous celibates. I have known promiscuous solitaires. But a conscious decision to refrain from sex can be a powerful incarnation of solitude. Actively chosen celibacy and solitude represent decisions to commit oneself for whatever length of time to discipline. Yeah.
He's leaving out something important, though.
You might talk about it later, but what?
Well, he's, and it's kind of, it's common, I think. There's sexuality and there's celibacy. And what's often left out of the conversation is asexuality.
Yeah, good point.
Maybe you could elaborate on asexuality.
Asexuality is where that desire has evaporated in every bit of oneself. It's no longer a part of interest or activity, or it's like it's just not part of a person's being anymore. And the way I think of it is kind of like we go through different stages, and I think celibacy is kind of like pretend asexuality. We go through stages in our lives where there are certain things that hold our interest greatly. And I recall very much a time when I think I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. And all of a sudden, all of my dolls lost my interest. I loved my dolls, but playing with them, I couldn't understand it. It was like, and what am I going to do now?
Right.
And
so you're saying, like, okay, so what I'm following here with you is that it's celibacy is first the choice to practice the discipline, but that asexuality may be the outcome of that.
No.
That's what I'm getting from it.
No. Celibacy is done as an artifice, as an artificial practice. It's like an imposition. It's like I'm going to control my sexual nature. Asexuality.
But what he's saying is that is the gateway to really expanding outward.
But see, I think that and that's what's commonly thought, and I think that it needs to be deepened a little bit. I was for many years an initiate in Surya Shabd Yoga, where celibacy was taught as part of the practice, and my husband and I practiced celibacy. And that didn't end well.
Okay, and that was like a restraint.
Yeah, it was like and it's like you do all these things to kind of
Tantra yoga,
channel your energy in other directions and all that, and it's going to help you lift up your kundalini to the third eye instead of dissipating it and all that stuff. And what I think there's and it's because of some inability to recognize in our culture the whole realm of asexuality. I never hear that in conversations about sexuality.
He does speak to that, but not as clearly as you do, in the sense that he says when you find the great alone, and that's what I'm calling it. He only mentioned that once. You get to a place where you never feel alone, that you're one with God, and all everything in you is filled, that you don't even desire or need this aspect to fill you.
Right.
But to come to that from a place of non-practicing, not practicing restraint, but just coming to it in your own development.
Right. And I think
that you're speaking of.
And I think it's natural, and I think it's part of the stages of life. It's like we have these natural stages where, 12, 13 boys replace dolls. And then, it's like motherhood and the kind of, maintaining a relationship with your husband and all of that sort of thing. And then I think as you become an elder, the natural progression in elderhood is asexuality. But our culture doesn't recognize that, and there's something
Yeah.
wrong with us.
Yes.
And it's like, how can you
Your light is diminishing. You've got
Yeah.
love and you don't
Right.
want it anymore.
right? And so there are all of these older people who don't know anything about asexuality. Their whole world has been defined by these kinds of relationships, and
Mhm.
so they feel empty instead of feeling full as they move into
Right.
this possibility of discovering themselves outside of the whole sexual self-image.
Nice.
Well, I must not be very evolved because all this talking about sex makes me want to do it.
Well, you're not at the right age.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
I'm
You're
being
still
silly, but
young.
I'm like, wait a minute. Talking about celibacy. Wait a minute. I'm in sex. All right. So I got
You're
some,
not
I
done
got,
yet.
I got some work to do.
You have some work to
So,
do.
but at each stage of life, and this is a lot in karma yoga, they talk
Mhm.
about
Yeah.
this. There's an appropriate way of
Yeah.
behavior that's appropriate to each stage of life. And
Right.
and we tend to mush them all up together. So, and
Mhm.
especially in the youth culture of
Mhm.
this country, it's like, as this, and I think maybe more for women, as we get older, it's like we're clinging
Mm.
on to all of the appearance and behaviors of youth and all of that, and
Right.
we don't have the models for this other stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the word crone. I think it's demeaning.
Mm.
It's there's
Well,
another,
with the wisdom, the elders, we have wisdom.
right, but only if we're able.
Mm.
I mean, it's not necessarily the
Yeah.
case that
Yeah, yeah.
elders.
That's
have
right. That's right.
wisdom.
This is true. We got some fucked up elders. No doubt. Yeah, but I understand where you're going. But there is a certain amount of reverence and continuity that's been fragmented in the embrace of our evolutionary experience of how sexuality has an evolutionary thread for many purposes.
Yeah.
Many purposes. And we're devoid of that knowledge.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's very valuable. And I like the word asexuality because I guess when I've thought about celibacy, I never felt it was a restraint if I chose it. If I went back to my 30s, it would have been a restraint.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's like, I'm celibate by default. And
you're okay with it.
And I'm okay with it. It's
Mhm.
like, I don't value it
Mhm.
the same way. I don't value sexuality. I almost feel like I gave myself every possible experience, fantasy,
Mhm.
anything I
Mhm.
wanted with it.
Mhm.
And it never answered what was truly
Yeah.
gnawing in my
Mhm.
soul.
And I think I'm in that same place where I'm saying we're not going to speak until something authentic comes out of it. Same thing with that. We are not going to engage in this way until something authentic comes out of it.
Mhm.
I don't know if I would have had that wherewithal or that intelligence even 5-10 years ago.
Mm.
Something would have been wrong had
Yeah.
I said we're not going to engage on any level, including sexually, until
Right.
something authentic comes of it. And if nothing ever authentically energetic comes of this, then this will not happen again for us.
Right. And that takes
And I
a
don't
lot
feel
of,
it is something wrong. It's something that's
Yes.
more right than anything. And,
Yeah.
there's moments where I'm like, yeah, that'd be nice. But again,
Mhm.
I know that the greater processes is in place and I'm not struggling with it.
Yeah.
I'm working so much on
Yeah.
migrate alone that it's fulfilling so many places in me.
See, and that's the
I'm not done
the
yet, though.
trade-off.
But
That's the trade-off is when you start to recognize the
Mhm.
self-fulfillment
right,
from your choices or no choice,
right.
right? As opposed to before we had all those
Mm-hmm.
compelling, degrading thoughts of inadequacy,
Mhm.
unattractive,
What's
lack
wrong
of
with me?
love.
Or physically is something wrong with me.
Right.
then,
Maybe I'm in the wrong sexual preference and
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. And then as you really seek to know who you are, we gain such an amazing strength
Mhm.
and stamina in standing strong and true to what is right for us.
Mhm.
And I can't think back in my teenage years that I could say no very often.
Mhm.
And why
You know?
should we? It's part of our growth and
Mhm.
learning.
Right. It was like, and it had credibility to it.
Mhm.
It was like, no, I could do this. But then years later, and then you go on and you start reflecting, going, ooh, and then you start to regret it. And then you're like, oh, yeah, what am I doing? And then it comes up again. You're back in the game until, like I said, it takes enough doing in life, experiencing in life, that something's not being fulfilled. And when you describe the dolls and relationship, I feel like I still see that happening on the world. Things fall away.
It's falling away. Yeah.
What I used to have such a passionate relationship to is no longer there. And sexuality
You're
is
no
kind
longer interested in dolls.
right.
What's next?
And in our culture, we define that falling away as failure.
Yes,
pretty much.
it's failure,
And so that,
inability to relate.
Or
uh,
solitude as something that's wrong, as opposed to this idea of it's imperative in the
Exactly.
weaving of our evolution.
Yeah, if anything out of this whole conversation today is I love the coming into balance and the empowerment of solitude. It's not isolation, like you started right off with the show. It's not isolation. It's not denial. It's great embrace of self.
Yeah.
Great embrace.
I think Jerry really got it. He said that celibacy is being inauthentic and asexuality is, oh wait, hold on, come back here. Asexuality is simply just being.
Oh, beautiful.
Right.
Thank you,
And
Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Jerry.
that's awesome. Well said.
And Tracy said there's such a strong desire for authenticity nowadays with self and others. And it's true. I think we can't kid ourselves anymore. So I'm emotionally mature and I'm spiritually getting there. So I'm able to say no more unless it's authentic. But I think it's also not me. I think evolutionarily we are in a place where we cannot function unless it's authentic. And
So-
everything else is falling away.
Right. So internet sex is safe sex in a way. It's
Well,
the
'cause we're not-
modern tech.
It
of
is
safe
because we're not
sex,
engaging that
right?
hemisphere
Yeah,
of our
you're right.
brain.
Don't
that-
have to get intimate. Don't have to, and you're not, necessarily.
Yeah.
It's like
As much as it feels passionate and powerful, it's not igniting that part of the brain.
Yeah.
So it's really just,
you're playing
sexual-
out the inauthentic.
yeah, which is fine. People need that too, but
Yeah.
whatever.
But as Dakota said about the internet, which I love, it's like it has its
And-
own evolutionary
Yeah.
nature.
And you can regulate the lighting and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Much
yeah, I
better.
just did that recently. Are you talking about Flux?
I'm talking about phones.
Oh no, no,
sex.
oh no, I would
You
not.
go,
just
girl.
do
Woo,
that.
woo, woo. Get it,
Dakota
Dakota.
just did that recently.
No, I'm talking about regulate the lighting on your screen at night. So, because if you don't change the lighting on your screen at night, it fries your brain. That's a new study.
Oh,
Oh,
that
so
you
can you
have to-
imagine having full lighting and Skype sex?
blow your fucking mind out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. She's saying, though, you're saying it's a new study
Yeah, so
that it's frying you.
there's a software called Flux, Flux,
Not fucks. Flux.
Flux.
and when you install it on your computer, it changes the light on your screen to match the time of day, because they discovered that the wavelength of light that's coming off of a computer screen at night is literally damaging the brain. And so, and it makes it, it
Nice.
also makes it hard to sleep. The melatonin doesn't release the way it
Yeah,
should.
that stuff is
So-
pretty well known. But the other part is interesting
Yeah.
information.
So, and
Nice.
it doesn't, it's a free download, and all you guys should put it on your
Okay.
computers.
Flux. Flux.
Flux.
Especially if you're going to have Skype sex, because you'll be completely mind fucking yourself in so many ways if you don't change your lighting when you're having internet sex. You're totally, it's so not safe sex. Or a condom, change your lighting. Don't say I love you because you don't mean it. You're brainwashing yourself. 3 easy lessons.
I
From
love
Dr. Hahn.
it. Thank you.
So Karen says, I believe our society is too sexualized. Oh, we could do a whole
Well,
show on that one.
Yeah, well, that's because
People-
of the way Karen's coming from. I mean, she's doing deep
Well,
study
yes,
on
exactly.
the abuse of sexuality.
Yeah, sexual trafficking.
And I agree. It's like, because that's what's been going through my mind too, is the exploitation of sexuality.
Yeah, and again, we're crowding our body with over sexualization. We're constantly buzzing and humming in this inauthentic sexualized way. I mean, people are hitting puberty at such a young age just simply from what they're stimulated and seeing in advertising. But she goes on to say, people feel like there's something wrong with them if they want celibacy.
Right.
I also believe that the profound meaning of sex between two people who care for each other is diminished. Yes, people don't get it. Even when we talk about, like, Tantra has been so overused. There's one paragraph, there's one sutra in the Kama Sutra about sex. The rest is about weaving together your expansiveness, not just sexually, but if you're going to go sexually, let's write a paragraph about it so you don't fuck it up, you know. But there's this whole tantric sex movement, and it's completely missing the boat.
Yeah.
In terms of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Karen, thank you for mentioning that, because it is diminished. It's diminished to the point where we don't even have an understanding of it anymore. And we call it spiritual sex or soul fucking or tantric sex. And we're not even hitting the mark, because we can't be with ourselves.
Right.
And as Tracy or Jerry said earlier, if you can't be with yourself, how the hell are you going to be with somebody else?
Right. Right. So, no. And unfortunately, we go down that path and we'll repeat it until, you know, like that emptiness, that void inside us says, something's just not filling me. I'm not getting what I need here.
Want to have sex? Come on.
Yeah, let's do
Anybody?
it. Come on. Well, adjust the lighting first.
Yeah. Want to make out? We can talk about how expansive we
Come
are.
on, let's
How
have-
you do it. Come
Oh
on.
man, we could
Make out with me.
Oh gosh, that would just blow everyone away, wouldn't it?
No.
Come on, just one kiss.
We only have
Well,
3
I
viewers.
think
It's
I
not that
think
big of a
We
deal.
only have
I think I'm going to change the subject.
okay.
Okay,
Yes.
we blew one person out.
Yeah, right. We
Uh,
got-
I don't know if it's time, but I wanted to talk.
It's time. It's so
Oh,
time.
I
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
maybe it might
it's
be.
okay. Go ahead.
I thought maybe it'd be good to, since it's Thanksgiving and all of that. Thanks to speak about the relationship of Thanksgiving with the vagus nerve.
Ooh,
Mhm.
interesting. I love the vagus nerve. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell them what the vagus nerve is in
Okay.
brief before we continue?
Oh, good.
In neuroscience, there are some labs that are devoted just to the study of the vagus nerve, which means the wandering nerve, and it starts at the base of the spine up under the skull, and it wanders to some different areas of the body. One of the first areas is it goes down into the throat and controls the nodding action, and also in the voice, it controls something called prosody, which means, you know how there's intonation. If we're talking on the phone, we can tell from the tone of somebody's voice what they're feeling. So it's the vagus nerve that moves the sound of our emotion into the voice. And it also controls all the subtle facial muscles that enable us to express, even if we don't want to, the emotions that we're feeling. And then it also controls the gaze of the eyes to make an eye-to-eye connection with other people. Then it moves down and connects to the lungs and the heart and coordinates the movement between the lungs and the heart and the breathing, so that, for example, when you take a deep breath, it slows the heart down. It's the vagus nerve that's doing that. And then the vagus nerve moves on down and moves into the liver and the spleen and plays a really important role for digestion. Other things it does is it controls inflammation in the body, and it is a major player in our immune system. So it's got some very important roles to play, and it's a part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that relates to digest and relax. And so you want an active vagus nerve in order to have all of these various important functions working properly. So what activates, and this is what's really interesting, what activates the vagus nerve, that turns it on and pumps up the volume of the vagus nerve, is largely mental and emotional. And so they're studying it as being kind of a channel for that mind-body connection. So, for example, and this has all been done through clinical studies and everything, I'll give you the bottom line. They've discovered that feelings of gratitude turn on the vagus nerve big
Nice.
time. And somehow we've always known that because there's been this tradition to give thanks before eating.
Which helps digestion, calm the body.
It
it's
turns on the
parasympathetic.
it turns on the vagus nerve, but only if you actually feel gratitude.
Mhm.
If you just do the little verbal prayer that's like, you know, by rote, nothing happens. But if we take some time before eating, and whatever it is that we feel grateful for, we tune into that and actually feel that feeling of gratitude, we've turned on our digestive process.
Mhm.
So for Thanksgiving, and a lot of people in this country are going to be sitting down to a big feast where they might want a working digestive system.
Yeah.
It would be good, instead of just, you know, there's a tendency to just kind of go through the motions,
Mhm.
but it would be really good to reflect ahead of time of like, what's going on that I know I can generate a real feeling of
Mm.
gratitude. So that's one of the big ones.
Beautiful.
The other thing that turns it on are feelings of compassion.
Mm.
It's the key hormone that works with the vagus nerve is oxytocin, which is the hormone of bonding and love. In neuroscience, they're actually calling it the love nerve
Mm.
because it's love, compassion, empathy, gratitude that it literally depends on to be performing all of these functions in the body. And when we feel disconnected, when we feel too stressed, when we feel anger and fear and all those kind of things, it shuts down. And it does that for a reason, because if there's something, if we're in danger, you know, and we have to summon up all the resources of the body to escape something or face a danger, we can't be digesting food.
Uh-huh.
And so it shuts down the digestive process to enable the energy of the body to go to the muscles to do whatever
Mm.
we need to do. And it shuts down parts of the brain that are needed for more thoughtful action. So being aware of that, we can do some very simple practices, especially if folks are feeling stressed. Knowing that before you eat, you're going to eat probably sometime during the day. And if it just becomes a practice to
Mm.
feel some gratitude before eating a meal, that's going to help to turn that thing back on so that
I love it.
we can
Yeah.
keep balance. And it's not hard to, I mean, surely there's something that everybody can
That you
feel
can-
grateful for.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so beautiful, because what I'm hearing while you say this is one of the things we're needing to do in life right now is the ability to digest
Lots of things.
everything
Mhm.
that's going on. And so I'm feeling my body energetically, like when I'm grateful and feel great compassion for what's happening on our planet, that, you know, and we add to our show, Get Lit, digestible bites.
Mm.
So this is adding, I'm feeling the expansiveness of this as well, as I applying it to all nourishment,
Mhm.
being grateful for everything helps
Mhm.
digestion,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know?
And it's going to help the heart and the lungs
Mhm.
because again, you know, there's heart palpitations can be happening because the vagus nerve isn't functioning properly. And, you know, the tightness in the chest that people feel, and the
Yeah.
difficulty breathing, that can be because of some emotional compression of the vagus nerve. So cultivating these positive emotions is just as important or more important than taking the right herb.
Oh, that's
know?
great. I love that. So maybe we can just, like right now, while we're sharing this, everyone just take a moment and, you know, wherever you are in your feasting today, but just take a moment right now and just find something to fill your heart up with that you can be genuinely, authentically grateful for, and find that compassion and feel it within yourself and the food that we're going to partake in, and family and friends that we're going to share with, and perhaps the cheer that you're going to quench thirst with, and then think about our entire planet, that there are many things to be grateful for, and may we all have good digestion, filled with the greatest of ease and effortlessness.
Digesting a lot of today too. We put a big thing out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this does tie in terms of the great alone. You know, we have to take that moment of expansiveness to feel gratitude. And so I wouldn't recommend practicing gratitude while you're on your technology. Find that moment, even if it's 5-10 seconds, to really tap into the energetics. Even if you can't name what you're grateful for, resonate with what you're grateful for.
And it's always easy to turn to a puppy or a kitty.
Yeah, exactly. Or a little baby.
My gosh.
Just smell the
Or a
baby's head.
baby, yeah.
Oh, and the vagus nerve only exists in mammals.
Mhm.
And knowing that the vagus nerve is in all of our little mammals tells us that it's functioning in them the same way it is in us.
Oh.
And so, you know, when you sense that an animal is grateful for you to come home or grateful for your attention, that is helping to balance your little animal's body.
Oh my God. I love that.
So I have a couple of things to say about the vagus nerve too, because I have done tons of research on it from a Kundalini yoga perspective as well. And one of the other things is that if you lack the production or circulation of serotonin, also stimulates serotonin, which relates to oxytocin and other things. But one of the most, you know, having gratitude is a great thing, but sometimes we have to have help to get there, or to balancing ourselves, or to increase our ability to circulate serotonin, or open up that blood-brain barrier. And one of the most amazingly strong meditations you can do is called Sudarshan Chakra Kriya. And it's all about pumping the stomach and doing these certain things. And it is the most powerful meditation that I've ever done. And it is all about the vagus nerve and igniting the power of the vagus nerve and crossing it over the blood-brain barrier. And it takes a little finesse to get the Sudarshan Chakra Kriya down. And I've done it with groups of people on Skype before. I taught it. I've been taught that by masters. And it is, you know, it's one of those sort of meditation is medication type things where it allows us to maintain balance and purity and have everything expansiveness within us. So if anybody's curious about Sudarshan Chakra Kriya and the practice of it, even 7 minutes a day, profoundly changes your life. So I will post an article on the, they did a bunch of research on Sudarshan Chakra Kriya and the vagus nerve and what it does within the psyche, the spirit, the emotions, and our physical body, a lot related to things like digestion. Great. So I'll post that.
Where?
And I'll post it on our Facebook page. And then also I can get together a Skype group to just show you how to do it. So if you're interested at all in knowing how to do it, let me know and we can put a quick group together to do that one, plus a couple other meditations that are really, really super powerful.
This is good.
You know, tons of research on it I have too. So between the two of us, I think it'd be a fascinating show to do on the vagus nerve. Actually.
And also, you know, you brought up the blood-brain barrier. Roger Landry did an intense show about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was speaking specifically to fluoride. And he was saying that the fluoride and the chemtrails, the alchemy of those two together is affecting the blood-brain barrier. And one of the things he spoke specifically to is he said that infants, young children, haven't developed
the blood-brain barrier.
The brain barrier yet. So they're the most vulnerable to the
Mhm.
water and to the air.
And the nanotechnology
so-
ingredients in
Yeah.
food, because
Yeah.
nanotechnology is so small, it does cross the blood-brain barrier.
Exactly. And so
Mhm.
now it makes me, the connection I'm making is like Dr. Emoto with
The
about
water.
hold the glass of water
Mhm.
and be grateful for the water. And we've seen this
Mhm.
proven,
Molecular
right?
changes.
So here you are, even if you know that glass of water. And in fact, recently I was in a restaurant. I was thirsty. I inquired. They said, no, we have not removed the fluoride. And I was thirsty for at least 2 good gulps. And I sat there and remembered that. And I sat and I prayed over my water and I held the gratefulness of that water. And I know in that moment, I purified that. So again, it's bringing us back to this vagus vein, right?
Nerve.
Nerve, this vagus nerve, conjuring and finding the genuine gratefulness and
Mhm.
compassion in us is right there with that glass of water.
And our inner technology, we talk about being distracted by the tech in the world, but there's this
Mm.
new tech
Mm,
of all knowing that we will eventually tap into. And, the
Mhm.
vagus nerve is
Mhm.
really one of those things where it is proof that our inner technology is so vastly more advanced than
Yeah.
anything we can call it on
Yeah.
outside
and we
of
don't even know
ourselves.
all of it.
But we can't tap into that until we put everything down and
Yeah.
put the technology down, the busyness, and get into the great alone and tap
Mhm.
into
Yeah.
the genius of who we are.
Mhm.
Our vagus nerve can solve so many problems if we ignite it and have a relationship with it.
What does it look like physically? Is it
Well-
like just in a little thin tube?
It wraps from
Yeah.
down all the way up to the base of your skull,
It's like spiral?
right? Doesn't
No,
it?
it doesn't go
Through the
all the way.
spine.
It doesn't go all the way down, and it doesn't go through the spine. It goes around it, so it's like on both sides. It looks like kind of like fingers. It's like
yeah.
there's fingers of it that come around into the throat, and then it goes down along the kind of on both sides of the spine and comes around
Like fingers
here,
again?
and then fingers that come down here.
Oh my gosh, that's so
and-
sweet. It's like you're being
Mhm.
It's like a
held.
girdle.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
like if you hold a baby.
Yeah.
It's like that whole.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so it's only in that upper torso. Doesn't go down through our legs.
No, it doesn't
No.
go all the way down. No. And it's really only in the kind of upper part of the digestive system.
So it's kind of like you could use the visualization of there's the fingers massaging.
Yeah. Now, I will
Mhm.
say something about herbs. There are some herbs that help to stimulate the vagus nerve, and those will be your bitters.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're also good for digestion.
And
Yeah,
and that's part
that
of
makes
how
sense.
they work.
What about when we take enzymes and like papyrus?
That's a whole different
Not
thing.
papyrus.
What-
Papyrus. is
Papyrus.
papaya.
Papaya.
Papyrus is old paper.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know, but
Papaya.
they don't. I know your language.
They're getting used to me. Okay, so it's a good thing I have a translator. Yeah. So so those things affect our
Papyrus.
digestion.
Yeah, but they work.
Yeah, you got to write it down.
The papaya, like that works directly on proteins to help proteins
Okay,
break down.
so that
it-
in Vegas.
But the bitters, it's like you have to actually taste the bitters, and that sends a signal to different parts, but partly to the vagus
Yeah.
up through the mouth. Certain parts of the mouth will pick
Okay.
up that, and part of it is because through our history. We had to learn whether we were eating something dangerous, and high alkaloid poisonous plants tend to, not always, but tend to have a strongly bitter quality. And so we developed it something where when the body detects bitter,
Mhm.
it mans the fort. It's like it gets everything ready to do whatever you need to do. And so all of your digestive enzymes, the hydrochloric acid comes out, the liver is getting ready with all its stuff,
Mhm.
pancreas is getting ready to release digestive hormone enzymes, and
Right.
so it primes everything for good digestion, and it does seem to have an effect on stimulating the vagus itself. So
Nice.
yeah, so everybody should go out in your yard and pick some dandelions to bring along to your Thanksgiving meal and pass out a dandelion leaf to everybody to chew on before they eat anything.
Not the fuzzy
That's
parts.
so interesting. I've had a tincture
Uh-huh.
and I haven't strained it yet. It's dandelion. I did it
Mm-hmm.
over the summer. I was thinking of straining it and bringing it as the Thanksgiving. Like,
Oh, that'd
and
be
all,
perfect.
and all I was thinking was
Digestion.
digestion. Yeah, like
Good.
put a
Okay,
drop
yeah.
in your water.
Well, no,
Uh,
that'd be too. That wouldn't be bitter enough. You really
Oh.
see. This is the thing. It's like we eat these. There's the tradition of eating the bitter salads before a meal,
Right.
but we put all the salad dressing on them.
And it glugs it down. just like,
Oh,
you
so
can't
you're
lots of-
not
don't-
kicking the
You
bitter.
don't taste the bitter.
Okay. Okay.
And our palates have been have declined in terms of our appreciation of bitter. About the only bitter that we consume regularly is going to be in coffee
Mhm.
or beer.
Just too, it's really acidic too.
Mhm.
So let's touch base with our Love Fest.
How's our
over
Love
here.
Fest doing?
Our
Our
they're
chatters.
just loving on each other. I'm so happy to meet you. I'm so happy to meet you.
Uh,
I'm so happy to meet you right now. Oh my gosh, I love Thanksgiving with you guys. I love you guys.
Yeah, I don't know if Karen has shared with Tracy and Jerry, but Karen is quite involved, an educator in the child abuse and pedophilia. She's an educator on how to keep your children safe, how to recognize symptoms, signs.
Karen, we still have projects I'm thinking of doing. I haven't forgotten about you yet.
Yeah, but I'm just sharing that with Jerry and
And anyone else?
Tracy and anyone else. Yes, we've had Karen on the show before,
We have.
early on.
Okay, so they're saying, well, Jerry said beautifully said, Dakota, about
Thank you, Jerry.
and the similarities between digesting physical food and situational events. I know for me, when I'm stressed, my digestion shuts down. When too much is coming at me, not even food wise.
Mhm.
So I get it. So happy you're here, Karen. So happy you're here, Tracy. Grateful to be here. Always surrounded by my four-legged babies for the vagus nerve comment. They talked about Dr. Emoto. If you haven't
Oh.
looked up Dr. Emoto's work, you should. It's
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And then more Love Fest stuff.
I should check to make sure Biggie
But there
hasn't
was
said
one
something up here.
thing.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
Biggie, our computer is kind of not as accessible. You may have been sending me chat things. Let's see. Oh, good. Okay. I haven't missed any messages.
Thanks, Rebecca. You're welcome, Karen. Yeah, so dandelion appetizers. Love it. Dandelion greens, yeah.
Yeah.
Put a trough out with graze.
Just one dandelion green is probably enough for a starter set for
Oh,
beginners.
cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
Okay.
just hand them one leaf to chew on and taste the bitter,
Okay.
and that probably would be a good idea to do before the big
Before
meal.
you eat.
Mhm.
Gosh, can we even identify the dandelions right now? Because they're so,
Here we can.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
okay.
Or any other, like,
Any other bitter?
arugula.
That's not my fave.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So we have about, it's 1:45.
10 minutes.
We've got about 10 minutes for to
10
wrap
minutes.
it up. So maybe our writer inners can just leave one sentence about their big takeaway from today, and we can all talk about our big takeaway. The 3 things not to do is do not oil yourself up and drink a lot of oil, and go have Skype sex, and then eat Thanksgiving dinner. That's not what you're supposed to do. That's what I learned. No, I'm kidding.
Unless the lighting is correct.
Unless the
Right, I
lighting
was
is
gonna
correct,
say,
and
and
you've at least
download
had
Flux.
one bite of bitters, and you promise to be completely alone together. You commit to being totally alone and disconnected together. Yeah. Then you can go gorge on dead animal right afterwards. You'll be just fine. That's my big takeaway.
Oh, that's a great
Yeah,
takeaway,
no
man.
problem.
That just killed
I'm
my
having an
appetite.
intimate Thanksgiving dinner for me and Jesus and George Clooney. I'm looking forward to it. I'm so going to hell if I believed in it.
Oh yeah, and have fun. Find good reasons to laugh.
Yeah, even if it's at our own
Yeah.
expense.
Yeah, or just rewind.
Yeah.
Remember the show goes on. What is it? DVR it's called, or DNR? I never can remember the 3
What show?
on our CCN. You have if you come in late on a show, you can turn it into a DVD, like a DVR or DNR.
You can
player.
you can DVR it.
DVR it, right. You can just rewind and catch the beginning.
So let's see.
Or rewind this part. The
Smoking
conclusive.
cowboy cigarettes, chatting with our chat room. Let's see what they have to say.
Okay.
We are growing arugula.
Good.
My big takeaway.
Yay.
Okay. We
Found organic dandelion. Okay, stay with the topic, you guys. Behave yourself. Come on, we're trying to do a show here. I asked you a question. Found organic dandelion at a local grocery store. Yes, I have two. Awesome. Okay,
Oh,
three big
good.
takeaways. What's your big
that-
takeaway from today, ladies?
What's the big takeaway?
I think probably for me, that it's I don't know, it's kind of late coming, but I'm quite moved by the new popularity and exposure of this whole idea about the value of solitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like it's taken a long time
Yeah.
to kind of start getting that up to the surface, but it looks like there's acknowledgement now
Yes.
for that, and I think that's big.
I think one thing about our
Yeah.
show that I can say is a testament to we are maybe the only thing I don't know about the rest is that both of us at any given moment will catch the very, very seedling of some transgression or ascension
Mm.
or
Mhm.
birthing that's happening, and we'll
Mm.
speak to it.
Mhm.
Right.
That's the one thing I think that we're good at. If we're not good at anything else, that is the one thing where we go, oh my God, I'm sensing this thing. And then all of a sudden, it's this huge thing, like the
Mhm.
conscious death stuff. And then I
Yeah.
went to the Buddhist retreat for the weekend, and we're
Mhm.
talking about conscious death, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think we tap into that. And
Mhm.
I'm really glad that I found this article and
Yeah.
resonated with that,
Yeah.
because I think it's a huge movement that's beginning to happen and a
Mhm.
rebirthing of our expansion.
Mhm.
Well, I have a very similar sensation as Dakota. Like I said last night, after having a conversation with you yesterday, having read the article, I stood here, like I said earlier. I said, I felt so integrated in the world. I felt like I finally understood my place
Mhm.
in the world in a
Mhm.
social way. And everything expanded for me. And then here I was in my absolute, and it gets very quiet here.
Mhm.
And I stood in this quietness, and I said it out loud. I just said, oh my gosh, I'm living here with God.
Mhm.
And everything in me, and I'm tingling right now with
Mhm.
just saying that. It's
Mhm.
like, I feel like I can celebrate my living with my God self.
Instead of it being something I have to remove myself from the world to
Right.
celebrate.
Right,
that
like, or
self.
be protective, somebody's going to want to take it away, and acknowledged.
Mhm.
And so I feel like I'm just blooming.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you. Someone who said these kids to sit in a room alone.
Yeah, I think it was him. It's true.
And if
Mhm.
that's the case and folks are catching on to this,
Mhm.
then it's an indicator of the kind of healing, global healing that we are.
Absolutely.
Also,
me
I want
not
to
forget this.
comment on vision of a vocabulary, a vocabulary of redefining spirituality. It's getting, for lack of a better term, modernized, evolved. That now when we speak of solitude and the celebratory nature of solitude, we don't even have to say, hey, go find God in yourself or go back to the old scriptures. We're starting to recognize a social aspects of ourselves that are reflecting a greater maturity.
Exactly.
Well said.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Getting more back to the authentic grit of the actual language that in its pure meaning.
Yes.
So
yes.
Tracy
Okay.
says,
We're going to wrap it up, Vicky.
Tracy says, I'm going to be working my vagus nerve to its fullest potential with Jesus and George.
And Clooney.
And then she says, want to join us, Jerry? Jerry's her husband.
Jerry's her husband.
And then,
You're a hoot, Tracy.
and then Karen says, Rebecca, you can have George Clooney. I'll take Jesus and Eric Roberts. It's not that either. Lastly, Tracy says, with all the changes occurring at the moment, conscious death is everywhere. And I know now how to embrace the flow of it, feeling the celebration of it all.
Oh, that I think
Tracy,
that was our
beautiful.
that was absolutely exquisite. I got
Mhm.
chills, and I feel like
Yeah.
that was our closure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too.
And
Thank you
We'll
for
let
joining
we'll
us.
let the audience close the program from now on.
Yeah.
Okay.
You let the audience close the program. Yeah.
Conscious death is
And-
everywhere, and I now know how to embrace the flow of it, feeling the celebration of it all.
And
Here's to celebration
wow.
today of our own
Yeah.
conscious death and community. Happy
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Mm.
Happy
Blessings to all.
Thanksgiving.
Love you all.
We love you.
So look forward to seeing you again.
Next week, we'll be here with you again.
And
Enjoy your feast today and your community.
so much love.